welcome everybody to the June live session of the Mad Masters course. If you want to use the chat function throughout the session, please feel free to use that. And we will crack on with the first question from Ben. And he says, estate agency seems to have been the same for years. Oh. Yes. Some people have tried to shake things up, but they typically neglect to ask themselves what the customer really wants. People see the industry in the same way they have done for decades now. So his question is, how would you improve the customer experience and how would you engage new consumers?
Ultimately, with AI, the direction of travel has to reverse, which is the estate agent, for legal and historic reasons, acts on behalf of the vendor. And I don't fully, you could argue, and you can get people to act on your behalf as a buyer, but you have to pay them. Whereas the estate agent acts on behalf of the vendor and then gets the commission. And that's probably the reason why it works that way around. I don't think it should work that way around. I think that there are enormous and unbelievable efficiencies and inefficiencies in the property market. For example, the estate agent will tend to go in and give an unrealistically high estimate of the value of every home, okay? Because that will maximize the chance that they secure the property to sell. Yeah. But actually they make money from selling homes quickly. And there's a guy I know who's an expert in this field who actually took someone on who wasn't selling many homes working for an estate agent and said, and turned them into the most successful estate agent within quite a large chain by basically going, only take on people who are desperate to sell, okay? Anybody who's kind of like a tire kicker, don't deal with them. Only take on people who are really impatient to sell. Because then you can actually, your general throughput and turnover goes up massively. Everybody else was thinking she was a complete idiot because she was handing them business, okay? What she was doing is she was handing them the business that would have taken 4 months and concentrating on the business that takes 1. That's just an interesting case where the other thing this guy says is that 80% of the problems in the business are down to Rightmove, okay? Which is that people this is a bit like online dating for housing, actually. And what an estate agent used to be is a bit like that Indian matchmaking program. I don't know if you used to watch that. Okay, about Indian matchmaking. There is a huge role to the estate agent in efficient market clearing by, for example, asking questions like, not just what does this person want, but what could I sell this person that would be difficult to sell to anybody else? Or this person thinks they know what they want, but actually I reckon I can sell them something different. Yeah. Okay. And I think that one of the things that might disrupt Rightmove, which would be great news, is a kind of AI iterative system where one of the things, by the way, someone tested my idea, 2 ideas which I think are necessary, one of which is wildcards. I think you should show people wildcard properties, because they narrow their options too quickly. Okay, that's the first issue I have. The second issue I have is that you should be able to search for negatives as well as positives. Yeah. So there's no way on Rightmove of searching for a fixer-upper, okay? There's no way of looking for an eccentric property, an architecturally distinguished property. There's, in other words, you're basically dealing with these commodity variables, which are basically number of bedrooms, which is a stupid metric anyway, okay? Number of bedrooms is a dumb metric. How big is the fucking place, right? That's just a dumb metric. So, but one of the things is, I said, if you're buying property and you've got a game theorist mentality, you go, I nearly looked at it. It went actually too soon. There was a house in Deal with a sea view. Okay. Normally the seafront properties in Deal are like 700,000-800,000. This one was 400,000 because it was next to a pub and had a massive beer garden in front of it. Okay. Now I don't care about noise because I'm Welsh and I love the noise of a pub, and I wouldn't have been remotely bothered. And I was going to go in and buy it. I basically go next door to the landlord and go, here, I'm going to make you a deal, okay? And the deal is, I will never complain about anything you ever do on 2 conditions, which is you'll deliver beer to me on request by an app over my garden fence, 1. 2, no techno, okay? And if he was happy to adhere to those 2 roles, he could have Norwegian death metal outside. I don't care. I just didn't want any fucking techno. Okay, it's just bleep, 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 bleep. I'm not on drugs. Sorry, I'm 59 years old. Don't want it. Anyway, but you should be able to look for a negative. And I reckon somebody came up to me in Google and said, I bought a house thanks to you. I said, what do you mean thanks to me? And they said, because I saw your thing, which said, find something that other people hate that you don't care about. Okay, could be next to a pub, could be next to a railway line. You know, if you're a massive Spurs fan, right, go and buy a house. Now, the funniest one was someone whose relative was profoundly deaf, and they bought a house in the flight path of an airport. Well, it's really sensible, right?
Yeah.
Okay, most people will be driven insane. If you're deaf, who cares, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that Rightmove is creating all kinds of problems for the property market, because we talked about choice architecture right at the beginning of this conversation. Okay, if everybody in the market uses the same choice architecture to find a house as everybody else, okay, fundamentally it's damaging to the market. Okay, so it's a bit like, let's imagine that everybody bought a car on the basis of, you know, like acceleration divided by fuel economy multiplied by, you know, top speed. Okay. Okay. They just had three variables and they all looked on that basis. We'd have shit cars, right?
Yeah.
You know, they'd be ugly, they'd be uncomfortable, because all those things don't fit into the same measure. And the fundamental reason why you need human estate agents and why Rightmove is such a problem is that we think buying a house is a rational issue, and it's actually rather like dating. Okay, it's massively emotional, and you can't define what you want in advance, because to some extent what you want is undefinable. You'll know it when you feel it, you know, and estate agents kind of know that.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I mean, have a look at other models, but they always seem to fail. I mean, Ostrich, I hope Ostrich takes off, which is, there is definitely an opportunity to have a secondary market of homes that are not on the market publicly, but you can see if you pay £50. And there's definitely an opportunity, which is that you can come and look around the house, but you have to pay money to do so. Okay, which is, in other words, there are a load of people who would put their house on the market, but they have emotional objections to doing it, which is they don't want other people to know their house is on the market. They don't want the locals to think they're moving. They don't want the house to be on the market so long it becomes toxic. They don't want a load of tire kickers coming around their house and slagging it off. Okay. Yeah. So there definitely is scope to create literally 4 times or 5 times the liquidity, because the number of houses moving, changing hands now is half what it was at pre-pandemic levels.
No.
Okay. And that in itself is a fundamental problem, because people just ain't selling.
Kaja from Bolt here. Quick fire and easy one. What in your eyes makes a great publicity stunt in 2025?
What makes that's really interesting. Obviously depends who you are and how mischievous you are and who your customer base is. There's a book to read on this called Why Does the Peddler Sing by the brilliant Paul Feldwick, who is one of the greatest planners of the last 50 years, spent his working life at BNP. Fantastic guy. And it's about the link between entertainment and selling. That there's a component to it, which may be a form of kind of, but I mean, you know, obviously you can use social media or influencer marketing that way to do a publicity stunt. You know, sometimes it's just there was a beautiful idea. I might have told you this before, but I've always loved this idea, which is that Cluedo, I don't know if you know the game Cluedo, it's a great board game. You have to work out by asking a load of questions who committed a murder and what weapon they use. And they announced sort of 3 months before Christmas that they were getting rid of a character called the Reverend White because they thought a clergyman wasn't relevant to today's audience. Okay, they had no intention of getting rid of the Reverend White. They know perfectly well that you don't dick with your winning formula. But what they'd spotted is the fact that everybody liked Cluedo and nobody gave it any thought anymore. And of course, the Daily Mail goes absolutely bananas, going, how can you possibly do this? This is a growing secularization of the age. It's political correctness gone mad, etc., etc., etc. And you get a stack of publicity. One thing is that there is probably I mean, Ryanair actually do it both on social media very well. And this famous thing of, we're going to charge customers for going to the toilet. And everybody gets really angry about it. And then Michael O'Leary explains, no. The point is, if we charge people for going to the toilet, they'll go for a piss before they get on the plane, which means we can make do with 2 toilets rather than 3, or one toilet rather than 3, which means we can fit on a whole new row of seats, which means we can make the ticket prices cheaper for everybody else. Okay, so that's another thing, which is I always think a clever strategy, which is say something that makes LBC really angry, and then have a really, really reasonable explanation for it.
Yeah.
And now it's also in keeping with Ryanair. It's not something British Airways should try and do. But there is always this really interesting way in which you can kind of game the media. For example, if there are things which are kind of weird, what you might call, how would you describe them? They're flashpoints in the media. It's something like working from home versus return to the office. Okay. You can play games there. Do you have a special, you in other words have a special shopping offer for people you have a special service for people working from home or something like that. Okay. And the other one is other ones, I was talking on the call last week with Herdify, and I said one thing that postcode data has is it's really, really good clickbait. The 20 postcode hotspots for mobile car, electric car ownership, say. And everybody then goes and wants to put in their own postcode to see how they stack up, whether they're on the top of the list or the bottom of the list. And there are certain techniques you can use, like localization, which work. But actually, to be honest, in a business, 100% of your reputation is attached to the work you do for the business, okay? And you're very reluctant then to appear silly. But actually, to a consumer, brands are not, let's be absolutely honest about this. Very, very few brands are actually central in their lives. They exist around the very periphery of people's kind of inner relationships. And actually, just being a bit silly and attention-seeking, painful though it may be, can be a really, really good strategy. But optimized for attention, and the other one is optimized for talkability, which is one of the reasons I don't like I don't like discounts very much, is that nobody talks about them. Okay, apart from the other faults we can all make about money off, it's not really very talkable. Yeah. Whereas there are certain things you can do where, someone was giving me a really good example the other day in Texas. I mean, Buc-ee's, for example, I don't know if anybody knows Texas, but it's a chain of absolutely massive gas stations, which is kind of like a cult in Texas. And they do reverse benchmarking, as I call it, where their restrooms are famously pristine and really, really clean, just as an example.
Yeah.
But they also have these really weird little anomalies, like they sell deer court, which seems a bit of a niche product to me, but maybe not in Texas. And they have these, these roadside posters, which are all making little jokes about themselves. And they actually appear like 100 miles before you get to the Buc-ee's. And I was saying to somebody in Texas, because of these silly posters, there's literally a poster that goes 120 miles to the next Buc-ee's, you can hold on, okay? And I actually said, I actually feel sorry for the gas stations in between the posters and the Buc-ee's, because everybody's going, why the hell would I go there, which is just a gas station, when I can go to Buc-ee's? It's spelled -EE_S, okay? And its logo is a massive beaver, for reasons I've never, by which I literally mean the animal, just to be clear. For reasons I've never been able to establish. But it's partly, it's attention, it gains your attention, partly because a lot of it is just weird, okay? Yeah. You go in and people are sort of shouting as they make the food and things like that. And, if you're on a long drive, it just breaks the monotony. So, there's a great book by Seth Godin, one of his very early books called Purple Cow, which is how you design products to create attention. And often that means, as to go back to Roger Martin, you create an anomaly. You do something that's just slightly weird. I mean, Ocado found that they do that weird thing, which was done for very, very serious reasons, which was security, which is you get a text that says your shopping is on the way. It will be delivered by Brian in aubergine van, registration number LH, 68 GPY. Okay. Now, it's actually, that was a very serious reason, which is, I don't think people are going to turn up in fake Ocado vans, but it was just to reassure people that the person was, a known person and the whole thing was legit. Yeah. But actually, because it's kind of weird, onion van, okay? Yeah. Onion van is a weird phrase, right? And you go, what the hell's an onion? Oh, I see, it's a van with pictures of onions on the outside, okay? That kind of stuff, actually, weird little bits of shit like that. It's hard to explain. They're just kind of like somebody's doing something that they don't have to do. It's kind of like discretionary effort. And it counts double.
Well, sorry to interrupt you there. If you want to watch the rest of this live stream, you're going to have to join the full edition of the Mad Masters course. Now, what is Mad Masters, you might ask? It's a course that blends behavioral science, creativity, and data, and it's all delivered to you by the one and only Rory Sutherland. Through monthly live sessions, on-demand Netflix-style modules, load of bonus sessions, and even an in-person meetup at the biggest marketing event in London, there's 30 plus hours of content delivered to you exclusively by Rory. So what are you waiting for? Pull the trigger and register now.